Yo guys, it's your boy. And today we have a video talk about David. The second David is by BlackySpeakz. So yeah, I'm proud of David. Obviously, I didn't know it was this bad. Why every celebrity go to something wrong? Like why? I'm not gonna just get into the video.
Now, like most of you guys probably know at this point, I've been one of the main people in the commentary space covering the David, spelled D4vd story ever since it broke. And this is a story that's absolutely shocked a lot of people for obvious reasons, right? It's heavy, it's disturbing, it's tragic, and it's one of those stories where the details that came out actually made this case look way worse. Now, yesterday, like a lot of you guys know, I dropped a video on the David story. And in that video, I basically did what I always do when I cover stories like this. I broke it down, I went into the timeline, I went into what investigators are alleging, I went into the details of the case that have now come out after his arrest and his first-degree murder charge. And my intention with that video was very simple. It was to inform you guys. It was to take a story that a lot of people are hearing pieces of all over the internet and actually break it down in a way that was clear, factual, easy to follow, and honest. That's been my goal with the story ever since I started covering it back in September 2025. To inform, to explain, to translate all this information in a way that actually makes sense. However, unfortunately, YouTube didn't see it the same way, and my video got demonetized. Now, before I continue, I want to make something very clear, because I know how some people are going to take this conversation that I'm having right now. They're going to be like, you just care about money. No, this ain't about no damn money, man. Would it be nice to get paid for the work I put?
Hey, stop like this.
Now, of course. Imagine if you went to work and you put in a bunch of work and you didn't get paid. How would you feel? Exactly. I put a lot of time into the content that I produce. So yes, of course, it would be nice, but that is not the main issue here. Believe it or not, I've had a lot of videos get demonetized over my long journey on YouTube, and I've never really made a huge deal out of it because at the end of the day, I've always looked at it like this. Being on YouTube is not a right, it's a privilege. I still have my channel. I still have my voice. I didn't lose my channel. None of that stuff is happening. Everything is still there. We are all good. However,
Damn, nigga, this nigga. God damn, nigga.
And this is where the bigger issue comes in. For this particular story, I think what happened here is a huge problem, and I'm going to explain why. Now let's get back to the demonetization. So YouTube initially demonetized my video, and then you can kind of like send like an appeal through YouTube. And I'll put that on the screen right now. I'll put it on the right side right here, okay? And it says something along the lines of like still under review. I'm sure you can see it. I'll highlight it right there. And so I sent that review, and then what happened is they essentially doubled down and they said, you know what? This video is not fit for advertisers, right? So basically my video was around 12 minutes and 22 seconds, and YouTube marked almost the entire video as unfit. So you get that yellow limited ad sign. So from around 3 minutes and 19 seconds all the way to 12:23, they basically marked almost the entire body of the video. The actual breakdown, the actual storytelling, the actual explanation, the actual case details. That's the part they marked. They limited the ads on that video, right? It's demonetized. And when you actually read what they say, they make it very clear that me and YouTube disagreed on the rating of the content. And then it says
I guess this video is about YouTube. I'm up and the story about the biggest story. Let's watch.
Now, most people have already heard about this story. Popular singer David, spelled D4vd, was arrested in connection with the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. But what's come out since then changes everything. The motive, the timeline, and what happened the last night Celeste was ever seen, when David invited her to his home in the Hollywood Hills, and she never came back.
Celeste, a 14-year-old at that time, went to Mr. Burke's house in the Hollywood Hills. She was never heard from again.
And months later, in September 2025, that's when everything changed.
God damn. That's the car that she was in, right?
Had been at the lot for a couple of days when asked about reports the vehicle is registered to 20-year-old singer David.
Because inside a car registered to the singer, investigators made a discovery. Remains found in the front trunk, unidentified at the time. After sitting there for months, it was eventually revealed that those remains belonged to 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez, a teenage girl from Riverside County, California, who had initially been reported missing back in April 2024. Celeste had disappeared out of Lake Elsinore that same month. According to authorities, her family searched, put out flyers, shared her photos, asking anyone with information to come forward, hoping their daughter would be found. The family had reported Celeste missing from her hometown of Lake Elsinore, about 70 miles outside of Los Angeles. She was just a 7th grader, and Celeste had run away before, and at one point, she did return home. But after leaving again, this time, she never came back. For months, there were questions, and no answers about her whereabouts. But eventually, in September 2025, they would learn the truth, that Celeste was no longer missing. She had been killed, and as her family was continuing to come to terms with that, things were only just beginning to unfold.
Wait, I think, this list have cameras, so where are they? That's weird.
8 hours of Celeste being officially identified, investigators made their next move, executing a search warrant overnight at a home in the Hollywood Hills area, where David, D4vd, Burke, had been living. And from that point, the investigation started to unravel. But for the public, very little was known. Details were limited in this case, and questions kept coming up. Until recently, because just recently, David was arrested in connection with the case, which sent shockwaves across social media and raised even more questions. But now, after all this time, the case against David is starting to become a lot clearer. We now know that he's now facing a first-degree murder charge, and now we actually have his mugshot. Let's just take a second and really look at this. We now also have what they say was the
He looks like an alien.
motive, a timeline of what allegedly happened, and the evidence they claim to have. And when you put all of it together, this case becomes a lot worse than people thought. Now, to really understand how this even got to that point, we have to go back to on or about April 23rd, 2025, when, according to investigators,
I never heard of his songs. Well, I did on TikTok. That's the popular song of his.
David invited Celeste to his home in the Hollywood Hills area. Celeste arrived, and according to investigators, this was the last time she was known to be alive. Now, up until this point, there have been speculation about the nature of his involvement with Celeste. And it's important to be clear here, we're talking about a grown man and a minor. According to investigators, that is no longer speculation.
What? Yeah. That looks dodgy. That looks crazy.
They allege that David was sexually involved with Celeste, and that this began when she was under the age of 14.
During the course of our investigation, detectives learned that she had been involved in a sexual relationship with Mr. Burke when she was a minor and he was an adult.
But it doesn't stop there, because
God, you know, really sick in head. That's what you do these things.
according to the criminal complaint, investigators say Celeste had at one point been living with David, and in their words, he had recurring access to her, which meant this wasn't something distant or limited. This was direct access over a period of time. Now, when it comes to that last night Celeste was alive, this is when they say things took a much darker turn. They allege that at some point after Celeste arrived to David's home, she threatened to expose the relationship between the two, including the fact that it began when she was underage, which David of course knew could seriously damage his career. At the time, David was a rising mainstream artist, and just 2 days earlier, he had announced a Withered World Tour, a global tour set to take him across multiple countries.
Whoever can do this all, you're freak.
As his career was continuing to expand, and that detail matters. According to investigators, this is where the motive comes in. See, investigators believe that once Celeste became a threat to David, after she threatened to expose their relationship, the situation escalated. And what happened next, they say, is where things went downhill.
This murder was committed for financial gain. As the evidence will show in court, the financial gain was for Mr. Burke to maintain his very lucrative musical career that Celeste was threatening.
They allege that after she threatened to expose him, the situation escalated into her murder. However, it didn't stop there. They allege that on or about May 5th, 2025, Celeste's remains were further altered. Her remains were later found inside a vehicle connected to David, of course, that we know, where they had been left for months before finally being discovered at an impound lot in September 2025 in Los Angeles. And the evidence they have is what they say connects him to what happened to Celeste. Now, getting into the specifics, this criminal complaint against David also includes special circumstances. And these are very important because they make the case significantly more serious. According to the complaint, one of those is murder for financial gain. Another is the murder of a witness.
What do you mean? But I'm so confused.
Celeste being considered that witness. And the third is what's called lying in wait, which means police believe the act was carried out in a deliberate and concealed manner. The complaint also alleges that David personally used a deadly weapon, described as a sharp instrument, in what happened to Celeste. In other words, they allege a sharp object was used in the killing of Celeste. Now that lying in wait part, that's important to understand, because in legal terms, it's not just about what happened, it's about how it allegedly happened. Lying in wait basically means someone waits.
If anybody likes to text kids itself to die, at least
watches and then carries out a surprise attack. In other words, it suggests planning and it suggests intent. Now if you try to picture this for a second, Celeste shows up to the home she was invited to by David, not knowing what she's actually walking into. And according to authorities, what happened next was anything but expected. They allege this wasn't random, but something that involved waiting, concealment, and a deliberate act in what happened to Celeste. And legally, that makes the case much more serious. Because when or if prosecutors are able to prove something like that, it can elevate the charges and significantly increase the potential consequences. Now, to really understand how this even got to that point, we have to go back to 2023, when this situation, not relationship, situation involving David and Celeste was already developing behind the scenes. At this point, authorities say the two were already sexually involved, while Celeste was still under the age of 14, but the full extent of it is still not entirely clear. What we do know is this. According to the criminal complaint, between September 7th, 2023 and September 7th, 2024, David was reportedly involved with Celeste during that time. And this wasn't a one-time situation. Prosecutors allege that this was ongoing over an extended period of time. It's also during this time that investigators say Celeste had at one point been living under the same roof as David. Now, one thing that's still not entirely clear at the time of me recording this video is how exactly Celeste being considered a witness fits into everything we're talking about right now. Although this is included in the complaint, they haven't fully explained what they're specifically referring to, or exactly what she may have been a witness to. Now, based on what's been alleged so far and what we know so far, you can start to piece everything together yourself in your head, if you get what I mean, right? Especially considering that they've already said she was threatening to expose the relationship. So one can only assume that she was a witness in her own case. You get what I'm saying? But we don't know that yet. So as of right now, that part of the case hasn't been fully laid out publicly.
The details of
what David's family thinks about this.
The allegations that have made, particularly with that special circumstance, will be produced in court.
Now we're at a point where we know, according to the authorities, that there was an ongoing situation between the two, that Celeste at one point was living under the same roof as David, and that he had direct and recurring access to her. And on that final night, she threatened to expose that. And from there, they allege everything escalated, leading to her murder. Now, one of the biggest questions people have been asking is, why did all this take so long? Why did it take this
It took them a year to do this. A whole year.
long for the police to make an arrest? And according to the authorities, a big part of that comes down to the condition of Celeste's remains. Because of how much time had passed between her death and when she was unfortunately discovered in the manner she was discovered, it delayed the medical examiner's ability to determine a clear cause of death. And that also meant that crucial evidence had either degraded or completely disappeared over time, unfortunately. On top of that, investigators were also dealing with something else, a massive amount of false information that was spreading online. If you guys remember, when the story first broke, things were pretty chaotic. There was a lot being said, and the majority of it was actually not accurate. And even a lot of very popular media outlets ended up pushing information that wasn't fully verified at all. And because law enforcement had to sort through all of that information while trying to piece together what was done to Celeste, it made this investigation that much more difficult, and ultimately, that's what added all this time to it. Now, another key reason why this case took time is because, according to the authorities, there was no direct eyewitness who actually saw what happened to Celeste. And on top of that, they also didn't have any clear footage that directly shows David committing the act. So, what that meant was investigators had to rely on something else, a full and extremely thorough investigation. They went through digital evidence, they went through forensic evidence, and every lead they could find, while also speaking to witnesses. And according to the authorities, not everyone they spoke to was cooperative. So before bringing any charges, they wanted the highest level of confirmation possible based on everything they had collected. And that brings us to another question people have been asking. What makes them so confident that they can actually prove this case? It comes down to the totality of the evidence. They say they have a combination of physical evidence, forensic evidence, and digital evidence that they plan to present in court. In fact, they say the amount of evidence collected totals over 40
Jesus Christ. That's a lot.
bytes. Not gigabytes, terabytes. And based on everything they've gathered,
Also, did the evidence out yet or not yet?
they believe they can prove their case against David beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, at the same time, his legal team is pushing to move things forward, requesting a preliminary hearing within the next 10 days. Right now, we don't know exactly what that evidence is or what it looks like in detail. And anyone who tells you that they have that evidence is obviously lying. But that's something we're likely going to learn very soon. What we do know is that based on everything that's been laid out so far, this case is way worse than we thought. And we're only just starting to see what it looks like. Now, with all that being said, I think it's important we stay focused on what actually happened here. A child lost her life. And that's something that should
That's sad. I need to know why he did it.
get lost in all these very grim and dark details or all the noise around his case. Celeste had her whole life ahead of her. You know, it was taken from her, and it was all taken from her in a situation she should have never been in to begin with. And that's not something anyone can put on her, because Celeste was a child, and children aren't capable of understanding the kind of situations they're being placed in. It's just tragic. And it's a reminder of how important it is that we protect children in this world and take situations like this seriously.
Yeah,
Rest in peace to
Facts.
Celeste Rivas.
facts. We need to protect our kids because they done some stuff like we do. But that's the end of today's video. Actually, somebody requested this video. I appreciate you guys, and yeah, take care.